Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I'm Rajdeep Pundi. I'm the co-founder and CEO at ReWiser, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. So for today's webinar, I think the plan is what we'll cover up the slides for the first 35, 40 minutes. We will open the forum for Q&As post that. So you can ask your question either towards the end of the webinar, or if in case you have any questions during the webinar, please keep putting them up on the chat section and we will take all these questions towards the end, right? So first we will go through the entire presentation and then we will be taking up all the questions towards the latter half, just to make sure we are not, we are not changing the flow of the slides. So with that, let me start the webinar for today. And as you all are aware, we are going to talk about the three major exams that one really needs to understand if you're looking at study abroad, which is the SATs, ACTs, and AP exam. And this is going to be the key takeaways from today's webinar. We're going to talk about the 4 pillars for the strong college application. What is the right time to start? What are the exams that one should be looking at? When, how, and where, and which exam particularly they should be writing it. In addition to that, SAT, I'm sure most of you are aware, SAT is going a change and they're moving towards a digital SAT format starting this May, starting March 2023 onwards. So we are also going to talk about the new digital SAT format changes in this particular seminar. So with that, let me give a quick brief about the company. So at ReWiser, we are a high school support company that assists students worldwide achieve their high school academic goals. We largely cater to students from grade 9 to grade 12, and we pretty much have 2 major verticals within the company. The first one is test prep, where we help students with exams like PSAT, SATs, ACTs, and advanced placement exam. And then we also have another vertical, which is in the academic tutoring domain, where we help students with IGCSE, IB, and A-level subject tutoring. So these are the 2 main verticals that we cater to. We've been in the market for almost about 7 years now. We've catered and helped about 4,000 plus families. And we are currently have presence in about 8+ countries. We help students across the globe, and currently we have been doing it for 8+ countries. With that, let me start with the first thing, which is the 4 pillars of college application. So obviously, I mean, in today's webinar, since we're talking about SATs, ACTs, and AP exam, our major focus is going to be study abroad. However, I'm sure a lot of you are aware that there are colleges in India which have started accepting SAT scores now as well. So we have a dedicated slide towards that also. So if in case either your plan A or plan B is study abroad, I think this would be a useful webinar for you. However, when we talk about college application, we are specifically talking about the college abroad. So there are probably 4 pillars that we can call. And first one is the academics. And when I talk about academics, we are largely talking about your grades, your scores in grade 9, 10th, 11th, and your 12th predicted scores. That's what comes under academics. Then the second part is your standardized test scores. When I talk about standardized test, I'm talking about SATs, ACTs, and AP exam. These are the standardized testing that happens. The third part is the profile building aspect, which is nothing but the internship, the research work, the blogs, any other activity, the leadership activity, the social service activity that you have done to build your profile, to showcase to the college that you're a good fit for the college, right? So that is what comes under profile building. Once you have all of this in place, which is happening in grade 9, 10, and 11, then you get into the process of college application in grade 12, which includes shortlisting of universities, which includes writing essays, collecting letter of recommendations, and so on and so forth. So these are the 4 major pillars in which you have to do well if you want to get into, let's say, the top 50 or the top 100 US universities predominantly. For today's webinar, we are largely going to focus on the standardized tests, and within standardized tests, we'll be focusing on SATs, ACTs, PSAT, and AP exam. To start first, I think we'll talk about the SAT. And I think since the SAT is changing, it's going to be digital starting March 2023 onwards. This is becoming an important topic right now for people to understand. So we'll talk about a lot in comparison with what it was earlier and what it is now. So first, the major change which is happening is SAT is going digital now. So it's going to be an online exam and it's not going to be an offline exam. You still have to go to the center to write this exam. You can't write it from home, right? So that's another thing about the digital SAT. The duration is reduced. Earlier, it used to be a 3-hour exam, but now it's reduced to 2 hours, 14 minutes. There used to be 4 sections, and now there will only be 2 sections. As I said, it is required by most of the US colleges. And in addition to that, it also helps in many other geographies. Now, the important part here to note is when I say most US colleges, right? Why am I saying this? So if you really look at it, there are two fundamental things that I would like to talk about. And I don't know how many of you have heard about this, right? So there's something called test optional, and then there is something called test blind, right? Now, what is test optional and what is test blind? So when you go to any college website and when you go to their undergrad admission, you will say that they will write that college is test optional. That means if in case you have done the SAT, you can submit your score. And if you have not done it, you can skip it. So that is test optional. And the other term is test blind. Any college which says they are test blind for standardized test, that means even if you submit your score, they are not going to look at those scores, right? They will not consider that in their college application process, right? So these are two different terms that you will encounter when you start doing your research towards the colleges that you want to apply to. However, in the last 2 years, what we have noticed, so the test optional basically came into existence because of the pandemic. So when there was pandemic, a lot of countries could not conduct the SAT exam, and hence colleges said, let's make it test optional. However, now what we have seen, the recent trend is colleges are going back to the test mandatory. For example, recently MIT, recently Purdue have made it mandatory for students to do the SAT exam or ACT exam, to do basically any standardized testing, right? So our recommendation, and also if you talk to any of the counselors, you will realize that everybody is suggesting that if in case you plan to apply to colleges abroad, you should go ahead and write your SAT just to be on the safer side, because when you are writing your SAT, probably you are in grade 10th or grade 11, right? And by that time, you would probably not know which colleges you will be applying to, and hence you will not know whether that college is test optional or test blind or test mandatory. Hence, just to be on the safer side, it's always good to do this test. So that's the first recommendation that we will have. Now, moving on to the digital SAT framework, the another change, an important change which is happening is SAT is going to be adaptive in nature, right? What do I mean by adaptiveness? So it's not going to be question-wise adaptive, it's going to be section-wise adaptive. So there will be two stages. Stage 1 will have 2 sections, math and English, and stage 2 will have 2 sections, math and English. So let's assume all of us are writing the exam today for SAT. All of us will have the same stage 1 paper. However, depending on our performance in stage 1 paper, our stage 2 paper will get decided, right? So the questions in stage 2 will get decided depending on our performance in stage 1. If we have not done well in stage 1, our difficulty level of paper is going to be easier. However, if you have done well in stage 1, the difficulty level of paper for stage 2 is slightly higher, right? And that might raise some questions saying, how would the scaling work? How would the scoring work in that case, right? And we have a separate slide just to explain how this adaptive engine scoring will work, and we'll walk through that in some time. As I've already mentioned, instead of 4 sections, now there will only be 2 sections. You're allowed to actually carry your own device. So though the exam is happening in a test center, but you can still carry your own device there, right? So that's an advantage again. You will have a clock on the screen, which will help you with the time management, which is again a welcome change, because we have noticed in the past that some students forget to take the watches during the exam, and then they are not able to look at the time and not able to plan it really well. So that's a welcome change. It'll be easy to move between the question. Obviously, because it's happening digital, they have an option to flag the question, right? So if you are not sure about a particular question, you can flag it and then come back to this question later at any point of time. However, when it was a pen and paper, you have to shuffle between the pages, like 20, 30, 40 pages to come back to a previous question, right? So that's a welcome change again. It will save some time. You are allowed to use maths formula in all places, which is again a new change. Earlier, you had a calculator section and you had a no calculator section. I personally believe, I think it is a great change for the students who are coming from international curriculum like IGCSE and IB, because they're used to using calculator a lot more than a CBSE and ICSE student. And hence, this change will be a welcome change by these students. In addition to this, if you really look at the content, in content also, there are some changes which are happening, and majority of them are happening in English section and not so much in the math section, right? One change is, if you look at the reading passages, which used to be there in the old SAT format, there used to be one passage and there used to be 10 to 12 questions pertaining to each passage. However, now in the new format, you will not have the full passage. You will have one para and you will have one question pertaining to that paragraph, right? So that's another welcome change by a lot of students, because you don't really have to comprehend the entire passage, and you don't have to retain it for the 10, 12 questions, right? So you're just reading a para and then answering the question. So that's a welcome change. However, at the same time, if you really look at it, you're also doing a lot of context switching, right? So you have to be okay with a lot of context switching happening. So that's another thing, and we'll have to see how that will pan out, but that's another change. Questions are going to be a lot more concise and straightforward. You're allowed to have more time per question, and the number of questions have been reduced, right? So obviously the number of questions have been reduced, the test time has been reduced. You're allowed to use calculator for all throughout the math sections. Your scores are available in days and not in weeks, right? Because it's an online exam, you will get your scores within the 2 days, 3 days window rather than 2 weeks. So that's again a welcome change. And I think some of you might think about this thing, right? How does it make sense whether I get it in 2 weeks or 3 days, right? I mean, so let me help you understand that, right? So if you really look at SAT, so SAT is conducted by an organization called SAT.org, which is, by College Board. And SAT happens 5 times a year. It used to happen 5 times a year, and now it will happen 7 times a year, right? So you will have it in March, May, June, August, October, November, and December. So these are the dates when you will have the digital SAT happening. Now, earlier what used to happen, let's say there was an exam in October and then there is in December, right? So let's say if you write the exam in October and now you're waiting for the results for the next 2 weeks and the next exam is in December, right? So whether you should do the exam in December or not, you are waiting for the results to come out, right? So you have already lost 2 weeks out of the 8-week window that you had between October and December, right? And hence, if the results are out in 3 days, you will have slightly longer window to decide whether you want to write it. And if you want to write it, you will have a longer window to prepare for your next, right? So that's an advantage that you're going to have with the results coming out much quickly. Now, as I've said, we will talk about how the scoring will work. As I said, there'll be 2 stages, right? So let's take an example here, right? Let's assume in stage 1, you have 20 questions, right? And let's assume that in stage 1, I scored 12, right, out of 20. So I fall in this bracket, and this is going to be my stage 2 level of difficulty. What will happen that my minimum and the maximum score will get fixed. At minimum, I will get 560 score. At best, I can only get 680 score. So my upper limit is also capped in this stage, right? However, let's assume there is someone else, Mr. Raghu, who is writing the exam, and he get 18 out of 20. In his case, his stage 2 paper is going to be difficult. However, his minimum score is also pegged now. His minimum score can only be 680. He cannot go beyond lesser than this. And his maximum score can be 800. So if he does really well in stage 2 or get everything right, he can get 800 on 800. Or if he end up not doing really well, he can still manage to get 680, right? So that's how the scoring will happen. So depending on your stage 1, it's not just your paper difficulty that will get decided for stage 2, but also your upper and lower limits of the scores will get decided, right? That's a critical factor, right? So don't assume that if I don't do well in stage 1, I'll get an easier paper. In stage 2, I'll ace that paper and I'll get high score. That's not going to happen, because your upper limit will also be pegged, right? So your upper limit is pegged at a particular score. So you want to make sure that you're doing fairly well in stage 1 to make sure your lower score is also very high, right? So even if for some reason you're not able to do well in stage 2, because you've done fairly well and exceptionally well in stage 1, your overall score will still be high, right? So I hope you get this, right? So I think stage 1 becomes very, very, very critical now. So I think that's how the scoring will happen in terms of the digital SAT. And obviously it's not a linear paper, so it's not a linear scaling. It is going to be an adaptive scaling, right? If you have any question, please feel free to put it up in the chat section, and we will come back to this later if in case you guys have any questions. Now, since we've understood how the scoring will work, let's try and understand what is the overall score, right? So SAT is out of 1600 points. You have 800 for English and you have 800 for math, right? So you can get a maximum of in English, which is reading and writing put together, you have a total of 54 questions. That is 27 in each of the section, and you have a total of 64 minutes. And the minimum that you can score is 200. The maximum that you can score is 800. Very similar to math. In math, you have a total of 44 questions. You have about 70 minutes to do this section. The minimum that you can score is 200. The maximum that you can score is 800. So overall, you have about 98 questions, which has to be solved in 134 minutes, sort of 2 hours, 14 minutes. And then you have a maximum of minimum of 400 and maximum of 1600 as the score. Now, with that, let's try and deep dive into each of these individual sections, right? What are they going to test you on? Now, as I said, the one section that you have is your English, which is reading and writing put together. Now, let's try and understand this particular section, right? So, as I said, there are going to be a total of 27 questions in each of these stages in English section, right? Out of those 27 questions, 25 questions are going to be operational. That means they're going to be the questions which will be considered towards your score. And you will have 2 questions which are experimental questions, right? Now, these experimental questions will not go towards your final score. However, they will not tell you which are these 2 questions out of those 27 questions, right? So for me as a student, I have to do well in all the 27 questions because I don't know which are those 2 experimental questions, right? So for you, it is still 27 questions, though the score is considered based on the 25 questions, which you're not aware of, right? And the same thing will happen in both these stages. In both the stages, you have 32 minutes per section or per stage, and you have a total of 27 questions. That means in totality, you have 1.19 minutes per question. And this time is very, very critical. So keep this in mind because we will be revisiting back to this specifically when we talk about ACT and when you have to take a call whether you should be doing an SAT or an ACT, right? So 1.19 minutes per question in SAT English section is what you have. Now, as I've said, they've reduced the passage from the entire passage. It's going to be para. They largely focus on 4 content domains that we will check in the next slide. The content or the concepts pertaining to a particular domain is always grouped from easy to hardest, and they're all put together. The important thing to note here is the passages that you will encounter or the paragraph that you will encounter in your SAT are taken from different zones, right? So you will have a literature passage, you can have a history, social studies, humanities, and science passage. So what it basically says that, I meet a lot of students and families on day-to-day basis. And what I've realized, one of the factors why we as Indians or Asian students don't do well in SAT is because of the English section and specifically the reading section, right? Now, if in case you are a student in grade 8, 9th or 10th right now, I think what you really need to start doing is you really need to see how do you improve your reading skills, right? And I would say start reading an article a day. Even if you can't read, start reading books, start reading 1 article a day. That wouldn't require more than 10, 15 minutes per day, but start somewhere. And when you are also reading, make sure you're reading different zones, right? So you're reading articles from different places and you're not just reading fictionals, right? You have to read from different places because that's what they're going to test you on. So I think that is one of my suggestions to all the students out there who are in grade 8, 9th, and 10th right now. Let's start reading some articles. Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. So these are few places that you can use to pick up different articles on different zones, right? Now, what are the 4 key content domain areas in which SAT tests you on? So these are the 4 that you can put them into. The first one is craft and structure, which largely, they measure the comprehension, vocabulary, analysis, and synthesis, how you are basically using the high utility words and phrases in context. Then the information and ideas, which is nothing but where you will have the graphs and tables given or information given. How well can you interpret this table and put them into idea? Then you have standard English convention, which is nothing but predominantly the grammar rules, right? The sentence structure, the punctuation rules, and so on and so forth. And then you have expression of idea, which is largely testing your rhetorical skills, right? Which is ability to revise the text to improve the effectiveness of the given expression and to meet specific rhetorical goals, right? So that these are the 4 major content domain in which the English section will test you on. Now, moving on to the math section, you will have again math section in both the stage 1 and stage 2. In both of them, you will have a total of 22 questions and you will have about 35 minutes per section, right? So that means you have a total of 1.59 minutes per question, right? That's again very, very important. Please do note in the SAT math section, you have 1.59 minutes per question to solve it. And what are they testing you on? These are the four, again, content domain areas where they're testing you on. The first one is algebra, which is roughly about 13 to 15 questions, which is quite a high percentage if you really look at it, roughly about 1/3. So you have, this is largely testing your linear equation, inequalities, and so on. Then you have problem solving and data analysis, again, very similar, 13 to 15 questions, testing you on ratio, rate, proportion, and so on. Then you have advanced math, wherein you have about 5 to 7 questions, largely testing you on non-linear equation, right? So quadratic equation, exponential equations, and so on. And the last one is the geometry and trigonometry, which is just 5 to 7 questions again, out of the 44 question, which is largely testing you on geometry and trigonometry. And this is again an important point to note, because when I'm talking about ACT, you will see a huge difference here, right? So here it's only about 5 to 7 questions. That's roughly about 15% is what you have overall in your SAT. However, that's not the case in ACT, right? Now that's overall about the ACT. Now what we will do next is we will try and explain you how the ACT testing framework works. While we are doing this, I will keep comparing it with the SAT, with the new digital SAT. The idea here is that as a student or as a parent, what you really need to take out of this webinar is, should your child be doing an SAT or an ACT, right? How do you decide whether a student should be writing an SAT exam or an ACT exam, right? Because in US, whether you write an SAT or an ACT, both are equally acceptable. They don't differentiate between the two. We have had students who have gone to MITs, Harvard, Stanford, CMU, Georgia Tech, and any of these universities with SATs or with ACTs as well, right? So we know there is no differentiating factor between the two. However, one of the differentiating factor, and let me start with this one first, is if in case you are one of those parents who are not 100% sure about sending your child to US, in some cases, I'm sure there are some students who are US card holders. I mean, they're OCI card holders, right? US citizens. So in their cases, mostly you want to send them to US and their ACT is perfectly fine. However, if you are not sure about it, and if you want to keep other country options also open at this point, you might want to consider SAT, or you might want to give SAT major preference. The reason being, ACT is only acceptable in US. However, if you look at SAT, SAT, it is also acceptable in some of the other countries like Canada, like Singapore, Hong Kong, and a lot of universities in India as well, right? So that is the first major difference. Think about the geography you want to apply to, and based on that, decide whether you want to do an SAT or an ACT. So that's going to be the first factor on how you should decide between the two exams. Now let's try and understand the test framework and see, can you decide it based on the test framework, right? First of all, it is going to be a lengthier test. It's a 2-hour, 55-minute test, plus a 40-minute optional essay section. So overall, if you look at it, it's roughly about 3.5-hour long test, right? And you have a total of 5 sections, with 1 section being optional. Everything else pretty remains the same. Test optional, test blind, holds true even for ACT as well. ACT is conducted by an organization called act.org, and ACT happens again 7 times a year. So in terms of the frequency exam, now both of them are similar. SAT and ACT both are happening 7 times a year. So you have that many opportunities to write this exam. They are also both online, both digital. So again, no difference there, right? You still have to go to the center to write these exams. Again, no difference there, right? So in this context, both the exams are very similar. However, in terms of the number of questions and the section, they're different, right? So if you really look at it, the first section that you encounter in ACT is going to be an ACT English section, which we also call as similar to the writing section, like the grammar section, right? And you have a total of 45 minutes and you have 75 questions to solve this. And the maximum scoring, the scoring works on a scale of 1 to 36, right? So the maximum that you can get is 36 points, minimum that you can get is 1 point, right? And then you have the second section, which is the math section. You have 60 minutes, 60 question. Again, just like SAT, digital SAT, you're allowed to use the calculator all throughout the math section. So there is no calculator section here. Third is a reading section, wherein you have a total of 35 minutes and you have 40 questions to solve. Fourth one is a science section, where you again have a total of 35 minutes and you have 40 questions to solve. In terms of scoring, again, the minimum that you can get is 1, the maximum that you can get is 36. And then the fifth section that you have is an essay section, which is an optional component, as I've said, and you have a total of 40 minutes to do this. However, please remember, can I request everyone to be on mute, please? Thank you. Sorry. Now, essay component. So overall, ACT is scored on a scale of 1 to 36, 36 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. So they find the average of all the 4 sections, and that becomes your final score, right? That's how the scoring works for the ACT. However, on the other hand, the optional essay component is scored separately on a scale of 2 to 12, 2 being the lowest and 12 being the highest. So it is not considered in your 1 to 36 scoring, right? And hence, we strongly recommend that you don't have to write the essay component. It's an optional component, you can completely skip, right? So that's also one thing. However, we also think it might change and colleges might make this essay component mandatory because of things like Chat GPT and the development which is happening in AI, right? Because just to deviate from this topic, right? If you really look at what is happening when you apply to college, if you remember the 4 pillars that I spoke about, in the last pillar, which was college application, one of the important part was the essays. When you're applying to colleges, you're writing at least about 2 to 3 essays on an average per college, right? And now with Chat GPT coming into existence, students can actually write essay with the help of this, right? So recently, and this is a very recent development in the last 2 weeks, UK colleges have removed their essay component from the college application. The reason is because they see Chat GPT as a threat where people are using artificial intelligence to write their essays. We also feel tests like SAT or ACT might get back with the essay component because this essay is something which student is writing in an exam center. So it is proctored essay, and hence it is going to be more like a real essay, which will give the essence to the college, the quality of essay that a student can write, right? So let's say if I have an essay which a student has written in an exam environment versus the essay that they have submitted during the college application, and if I see a huge variation in the quality of the 2 essays, I know there is something wrong, right? There's something fishy. So we think colleges might, or SAT or ACT organization, College Board or ACT.org might go back to making test essays mandatory. However, right now it's optional, so you don't have to write it. Coming back to the ACT, now let's try and deep dive into individual section, right? The first section is the English section. As I said, very similar to the grammar section of the SAT. You have a total of 45 minutes and you have 75 questions to solve. That means you have only 36 seconds per question. Remember the time that I told you, right? In SAT, you had 1.19 minutes per question for English section, as opposed to 36 seconds per question. That's crazy, right? So that's almost about 1/3 of the time that you have there. But that also means that in ACT, the questions are going to be a lot more straightforward. They're going to be a lot more easier. However, you as an individual have to really figure out as a student that, am I the one who is okay with slightly difficult and complex question and trying to go deep dive into it? Or am I the one who is okay with the time pressure? If I'm okay with the time pressure, I might go with ACT because the questions are going to be a lot more straightforward. However, if I'm not, then I want to look at SAT, right? So that becomes another important factor, time factor, right? Are you okay with the time pressure or not? So I think that's another factor apart from the geography that you're applying, whether you should be choosing an SAT or an ACT, right? And this will percolate across all the sections and we will see that, right? Now, in the ACT English section, they're basically testing 2 skills, usage and mechanics, which is very similar to the standard English convention that we talked about in the SAT, and the rhetorical skills, again, that we talked about in the SAT. So content-wise, they are pretty much testing you on the same skills. And hence, You can prepare for SAT and ACT content-wise in the same manner, right? Only it's the style of questioning, the difficulty level of question, the vocab which is used in the passage, which will be difficult. However, the concepts remains the same, right? That is what happens in English section. The next section that you have is the math section, where you have a total of 60 minutes and 60 questions. Again, 1 minute per question. Remember the time that you had in SAT, you had roughly about 1.59 minutes per question. And here you only have a minute per question, right? So that obviously, again, you have to be really, really quick, though you're allowed to use calculator here. Let's see, what are they testing you on? So algebra is one, wherein you roughly have about 24 questions out of 60 questions, right? So which is a very high percentage, about 40% of them. And then next, if you look at it, geometry and trigonometry, you have roughly about 27 questions which are coming from geometry and trigonometry. That's almost about 50%, right? If not 50, say about 45%. Remember, this is the other difference which I was talking about. If you as a student is somebody who does not enjoy geometry and trigonometry as a topic, you may want to stay away from the ACT because you have a very high percentage of it here. However, on the other side, if you enjoy geometry and trigonometry and not so much for algebra, then you might want to look at the ACT and not SAT, right? That's another important factor that you might want to consider when you're looking at SAT versus ACT battle, right? Next is the reading section, which is very similar to the SAT reading. You have to read the passage and then answer the questions. You have a total of 35 minutes and you have a total of 40 questions to solve it. You have 4 passages. Every passage will have 10 questions each. And you have roughly about 52 seconds per question. Again, a time pressure game. They're testing you on pretty similar thing. The passages is taken up from natural science, prose fiction, social science, and humanities. So very, very similar to what you have encountered in the SAT reading. As I said, content-wise, very similar. It's only the vocab or the difficulty level of the questions which will vary between the SAT versus ACT. The last section, and which is a very, very important section, and I think there's a lot of myth around this section, and that's why I want to spend a slightly additional time on this, is the ACT science section, right? So I get a lot of parents and students coming to me and saying, hey, Rajdeep, my child wants to do a major in economics, right? So I shouldn't be doing ACT, right? Because there's a science section in ACT. So it's more aligned towards the STEM course. Or someone else will come and say, hey, we want to apply for an engineering degree. So we should be doing ACT because we have an ACT science here. Or my child is not good in science and they have dropped science in grade, whatever, 9th. So we shouldn't be doing ACT, right? So let me, bust that myth here. When I talk about ACT science, there is no science as such. You are basically reading the science-based passages and answering the question. So it's pretty much a reading section. That's how I consider it, right? If you're a science student, would you be an advantage? Definitely yes, because you might have done those experiments in school, and hence you probably would have read about it, and it might be easier for you to quickly read and understand those passages. However, even if you have not, it's completely fine. These are going to be an unseen passages for you, right? So please note, you don't have to have the science knowledge. It's pretty much the reading section. You're reading the science-based passages and then answering the question. You have roughly about 52 seconds per question, which is very similar to the reading section. What they're testing you on, very similar thing, data representation, which is nothing but where you have the tables, charts, and graphs. You're reading through that and then answering the question. Then research summary, where there's a scientist who has done some research and his research summary is provided. You have to read that and answer the question. And then you have the conflicting viewpoints where two different people viewpoint on a particular topic is taken. Generally, they're conflicting in nature. That will be put up in a passage and then you have to answer the question, right? So these are the different categories of passages that you will encounter in the ACT science. So that's pretty much about the ACT. So I think we talked about the differences between the two and how do you figure out whether you should be doing an ICT versus ECT. So we talked about the geography. We talked about how do you divide based on the speed, the time, the type of question. I think one more way in which you should determine the SAT versus ACT battle is by writing a diagnostic test. So at ReWiser, we provide a free diagnostic test to every student who wants to write it. You should write one diagnostic for SAT and one free diagnostic for ACT, just to analyze your scores, see how much are you getting, and based on that, you can decide whether you are more suited towards SAT or ACT, right? So that is something that you can always reach out to us, reach out to my team, and they'll be happy to organize a free diagnostic test for you. So this is how you should figure out this battle between SAT versus ACT. Now, some of you might have this question about what is PSAT, right? So let me quickly cover this up as well. PSAT is nothing but a practice SAT or a preliminary SAT, which is offered by some of the schools. Some of the major international schools offer them in school itself. However, a lot of schools don't offer it. In that case, if in case you want to write it, then you might have to apply to a school for just writing this particular exam. It happens only once a year. Why do people write it? There are various reasons why people write preliminary or a practice SAT. One is, so some people write it in grade 10 because they want to apply for summer schools, right? And if you want to apply for summer school, there are some summer schools which accept PSAT scores for giving you the admissions for the summer school. So that's one of the reasons why some people write it. Some people purely write it just to evaluate and figure out where do I stand today, right? Globally, where do I stand and what are the areas where I need to improve when I write my SAT? So that could be another reason. The third major reason some people write it, if you are in grade 11 and if you're a US citizen, please remember these two criteria. If you're in grade 11 and you are a US citizen, then you should definitely write the PSAT because the PSAT is known as NMSQT, which is National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, right? So you should be writing the NMSQT. You might be eligible for scholarship if you end up doing well in PSAT. However, this is only applicable for students who are US citizen and are in grade 11, right? So these are the two major criteria. I will not take this slide because they will going to go have some changes in the PSAT as well, because right now this is the structure for the pen and paper. They're also going to go digital for the PSAT. But I mean, just for your sake, PSAT is subset of SAT. Very similar questions, all the same sections. Only the difficulty level of question might be slightly easier, but otherwise, paper is very similar to the SAT. That's about the PSAT. So we've covered the SAT, ACT, PSAT, and then the last exam, which is advanced placement. Now, this topic in itself is huge, and we have done multiple webinars on this topic, and that itself is an hour-long webinar. But I will just briefly cover this up. And if in case you guys have more questions pertaining to advanced placement, you can visit our YouTube channel. You will find a webinar on advanced placement. You can probably look at it. It'll probably help you understand what it is. Advanced placement in an exam, consider it like this, right? So we in India are doing CBSE, ICSE, IGE, IB, different sort of curriculum, right? Now in US, I'm sure most of you are aware, in US, they don't have a standard curriculum like we have a CBSE or ICSE, right? So what they do is a lot of schools follow this curriculum called advanced placement, right? Which is offered by College Board. Advanced placement are courses which are considered to be a college level course. And there are various reasons why people write it. So as Indians or somebody who is outside of US can also write the advanced placement exam as a private candidate. However, they happen only once a year, which is in the month of May. Now, and the scoring is out of 1 to 5. So 5 being the best and 1 being the lowest. But I think the important question is why should you take the AP, right? Should you even be taking the AP, right? So there are various reasons why somebody takes an AP. And one of the important reasons is if you want to showcase the rigor of your curriculum, right? If you want to showcase that you have taken add-on rigor as compared to what your peers are doing, right? So I generally put this into two brackets. If you're coming from a CBSE and ICSE or a state board background, you should definitely be looking at writing the AP exams, because in that case, you don't get any college credits when you're doing CBSE, ICSE, and they are not highly recognized there. And they don't consider it to be at par with the international curriculum in terms of the difficulty level, right? However, when you're doing an AP exam, you get college credits, and AP is widely recognized in US. So they understand if you get a 515 in AP, what is your level, right? So I think it helps you to build the rigor. On the other hand, if you're coming from an international curriculum, you already get college credits, right? So you may not want to do it purely for college credit purpose because you're anyways getting it through your courses that you're doing in school. However, you may want to do it for bringing an additional element into your overall profile, right? So let's say my profile is all towards science and maths and so on. Now, US as a geography prefers or likes to have one or two liberal arts or let's say humanities courses in picture, right? So you may want to write AP World History just to give a flavor to it, or you may want to write AP Psychology just to give a flavor to it, right? Because that's the course that you're not doing in your school, right? So one is obviously to stand out in college application through various ways. You also write AP because you earn college credit. And remember, when you're earning college credit, that means you are saving cost, because every credit that you earn in US is roughly about $1,000 to $1,500. So depending on the number of credits that you can capture or you can gain in grade when you're in India, will help you to save that much money there. At the same time, it will also help you to save time, because when you go to the college, if, for example, if you've done an AP calculus course, while you are in India and you've got a 515, you can actually skip the next 3-semester math course. Sem 1, 2, and 3 maths can be skipped just because you've done calculus BC while you're in India. So when you're skipping those courses, you can actually plan to also graduate early, right? Maybe you can graduate in 3 years, 3.5 years, right? That means you're saving at least the cost of living for that 1 year or 6 months. So there are this could be one of the way in which you can save time, and you can also save money. And in some cases, some students use it not to save money, but they want to do it in 4 years, but they also want to do an additional minor, right? So they add courses from the minor subjects and hence write the AP. So again, as I said, AP in itself is a very, very vast topic. I wouldn't want to get into it right now. Feel free to go and visit our YouTube channel and watch the AP webinar there. You'll get a lot more understanding on this. With that, I think we have covered all the tests. Let's quickly look at the standardized testing timeline. As I said, we are talking about grade 9, 10th, 11th, and 12th. These are the 4 grades. In all these 4 grades, you're going through the profile development activities. You are working on your academics. That's the super priority. When you're in your grade 12, you start applying. Your college application process start, which is nothing but shortlisting of universities based on your ambitious reach and safe universities. And then you write the letter of recommendation, you figure out people who will write the letter of recommendation for you, you write essays, and then you apply, right? And before that is when you write these exams called PSAT, SATs, ACTs, and APs. Grade 10th is a good time for you to start, dipping your feet in water and try to understand what SAT, ACTs are. Write a diagnostic test, try and figure out which one you would want to write. I've seen a lot of students who are doing fairly well in school, also able to finish their SAT, ACT in the grade 10th itself by the end of grade 10. If not, the summer break of grade 10th is definitely when you should start and try and finish your SAT or the ACT by the early of grade 11, right? So by September, October of grade 11th of that year, you should be done with your SAT, ACT. APs, you can write it in grade 9th, you can write it in grade 10th, you can write it in grade 11. You can also write it in grade 12 because the scores are valid for 5 years. Same for SATs as well. Now, I think in AP, what is more important and critical is to figure out which AP should you write, right? I think that is an important question and a more difficult question to answer. And that's something that we really need to look at one-on-one profile and then answer it. Towards the end, we will. I would request my teammates to share my colleagues' numbers here. You can get in touch with them, talk to them, and figure out what will be an ideal AP course for the student, right? For your child, because every student is different depending on which grade they are in, which curriculum they are in, which board they are in. I think all these factors comes together to decide what is the right AP and when should you be writing it, right? That's how the testing timelines look like. Now with that, I promised that I will show you the list of colleges in India which are accepting SAT scores, because there are some parents who also keep India as a plan B, and we should always do that because we don't know how the international things keeps changing, right? So we've seen that in pandemic. So there are a lot of universities. There are almost about, actually right now, 30 plus universities across India which have started accepting SAT scores. And some of the famous ones are Ashoka, Zeen Premji, Kriya, Flame, Manav Rachna, Shivnadar, Klaksha. So most of these latest liberal arts universities, they have started accepting SAT scores. And what's the advantage of writing the SAT score? So if you really look at it, if you're doing not doing the SAT score, you can actually write their individual exam. But then let's say if you want to apply to 5 universities, you will end up writing 5 different exams, right? Which is, and doesn't make sense, right? You might as well write the SAT, which is one single exam, and then apply to 5 universities, right? So I would probably do that. And hence that's an advantage if in case any of these universities or anything from the other 20 universities is in your list, then you probably might want to write the SAT, right? So this is one important information. With that, we've covered this component. Let me quickly take 2 minutes and explain you how at ReWiser we help. So as I've said in the beginning, we help you with SETs, ACTs, and AP prep exam. I'm going to take an example of our SET program right now. So we divide our pedagogy is based on 4 phases. 4 is 0, 1, 2, and 3. Phase 0 is about doing a diagnostic test. We want you to write a diagnostic between ST, AST, figure out which is an ideal fit for you, and then decide which test you should be taking, right? So that's the phase 0 component. Then there is phase 1, and that's a free of cost. So anybody can come and do that thing. Phase 1 is where the actual classroom training happens. We are a pure remote organization, catering across India now, students from almost 15 plus cities. In phase 2, there are roughly about 40 hours of live training that happens for reading, writing, maths component. And then there are assignments pertaining to each class. If you're doing a 2-hour class, you have a 2 hours of assignment. We believe in 1:1 philosophy. And after every session, you have to also update your scores in something called a score tracker, which help us to figure out where are you right now at this point of time. Then you move to phase 2. Phase 2 is where the program becomes a customized program. We assign a dedicated mentor. So we don't believe in one size fit for all approach. We feel that these exams are very different and it requires a very customized approach. And hence, from this part, we make it a personalized program. We assign a dedicated mentor to every student. This mentor will analyze the score from phase 1 assignments, and based on that, help the child to make a weekly or a bi-weekly study plan in terms of what they should be doing to improve their SET scores in different sections, right? So that is what happens in phase 2. And this is the point where students end up writing a lot of section tests. Once that gets over, they move to phase 3, which is largely about the full length test, where students would do at least about 10 to 15 mock tests before they write their final exam. And every test that they get, right, they get a detailed report saying what areas you have done well, what areas you need to improve, and so on and so forth. And similarly, the mentor will continue to go back, keep looking at this course, analyze it, and suggest what are the changes that they really need to do to improve in those areas, right? So that is what happens in phase 3. So that's how the entire 4-phase approach works. We provide the support to the students for the 2 attempts. Even if you end up not doing great in the first attempt, we will continue to provide our support for the second attempt as well. That's how our major pedagogy is. However, we allow students, as I said, we don't believe in one size fit for all. We have different options available for students to opt for. You can sign up for the full program that I just explained. You could just sign up for English only part. You can sign up for just maths only part. You can sign up for just the testing module, right? Where you think you have prepared well on your own, you just want the test from us, or you just want to take a self-paced course from us and prepare on your own. If you think you are self-diligent and mature enough to handle that on your own, you can also do that, right? So we don't believe, as I said, giving offer everything to everybody. I think we try and customize it depending on every student individual requirement. So there are different modules that we have. By end of the day today or tomorrow, what we will also do is we'll send out the recordings of these webinars that you guys have attended today through the mail. And at the same time, we'll also send out the brochures to you for our program details for you to understand more about the programs and offering. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our team. Here are the numbers. At the same time, I think we'll drop a couple of numbers in the chat section as well for you to come back and ask any questions. With that, I have covered the entire topic that I wanted to cover. Now I will open the forum for Q&As. So before that, if in case anybody does not have any question and you would want to leave, that's completely fine. However, generally we have seen these questions are very, very important because you may not have thought about these questions, somebody else would have. So it's good to hear out these answers as well. So stay on the call if you can. If not, I would like to thank everyone who have joined in today. And I see, there were 30 people in the beginning, there are 30 people now. I hope this session was useful. If in case you are planning to drop in, thanks again for joining in. With that, let me start taking up the questions from the chat section itself. Great. Okay. I have a first question from Dr. Nikunjana Patel. Maximum, how many times one can attend SET in 1 year? So Nikunjana, you can do it as many times as you want. There is no restriction on that. However, it's not advisable to do it more than twice. And you can do it thrice at best, at max, but not more than that, because then it may not really go in your favor, right? Because then you're doing it for the sake of it. And colleges will not really see it in a good faith. Also remember, there are generally 3 categories of college. One set of college which will say you have to submit all your scores. So college will get to know all the attempts that you would have done and your scores as well, right? Then there's a second set of college which will say submit the best score, right? In that case, you have an option to just submit the best one. In the third case, the college will also say submit the best super score. Now this is important. What is super score? You can submit the English from one test and you can submit the maths from the other test. That is what they meant by super scoring, right? So that's again something that you might want to look at, and hence we recommend you writing it twice, and that's an ideal number. In Agarwal, another question: what kind of question you can expect for SAT? And I think I have kind of taken that up during the SAT explanation. However, please feel free to go to our website. We will also send you the registration link. You can register on our website. You will get a free diagnostic test for SAT. You'll be able to see all the type of question that you can encounter in the exam. So I hope that will help. Okay, that's a question from Diti Agarwal. Vivan, is science a part of SAT? Okay, I think you have asked this question in 1127. I hope now you're clear that science is not part of SAT or ACT either. To answer your question, no, science is not part of SAT. It's not even part of ACT. It's only the science-based passages that you're reading and answering the question. So yes. Shruti, what does essay optional mean? I hope I've answered that question, Shruti. What does essay option mean? That you are allowed, if you want, you can write it. If you don't want, you can skip it completely. It's not mandatory for everybody to do this essay optional component. And it is obviously not part of your 36 point, right? It's scaled separately, so it's not affecting your overall score. Another question from Mr. VP: is calculator allowed? Is there negative marking? There's no negative marking, VP. Yes, calculator is allowed for both SAT and ACT, as we have discussed multiple times through the call. Another question from Dr. Nikunjana: can anyone use extra time of previous section? Oh, great question. No, you cannot use extra time from previous section. It is sectional wise, right? So for a particular section, the time that you have to use it in the same section. You cannot use the time from, let's say, math section and English section. That's not allowed, or vice versa. Diti Agarwal, what do you mean by we can use calculator during exam? I mean to say that you can use the calculator for doing the calculation for maths, right? So you're allowed to use calculator. You're allowed to take your calculator along with you in the exam hall. That's what I meant. Another question from Dr. Nikunjana: can anyone appear for both SAT and ACT? Great question. Yes, you can appear for both SAT or ACT. We have had students in the past who have done that. However, that's why I'm saying that. That's why I was trying to do the entire comparison between the two to help you understand that, to save some time, right? You wouldn't want to prep for both and write both and then decide, right? Because reality is there is a lot more other things that you would want to do just apart from just writing SAT, ACT, right? Because there's so much that you need to do in terms of profile building aspect that ST is just one factor out of maybe the 10 other factors in your application profile, right? So you wouldn't want to waste time in that. Another question by Diti: if you're not a US citizen, can apply for a scholarship exam. What is college credit? If you're not a US citizen, can apply for a scholarship exam. If you're not a US citizen, I believe, Diti, you cannot apply for NMSQT, right? Then you will have to apply for a different set of scholarship. There are like financial aids and merit scholarships that you can apply to, but not the NMSQT, not the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. What is college credit? Okay, so let's assume this, right? So if I have to become, let's take an engineering degree, right? If I want to become a mechanical engineer in 4 years, I have to earn 150 college credits, right? What do I mean by that? That means every subject that you do in college have certain credits. For example, maths will have 5 credits, in physics will have 4 credits, computer science will have 8 credits, and so on and so forth, right? So as and when you are doing these subjects, you are earning those credits. You have to get minimum of certain credit to graduate, right? That is what college credit means. I hope I was able to answer that. That's a much more detail, I'm sure, over the like Google, if you Google it, you'll be able to find a lot more details on that. But that's very, very relatable to the college credit system, how it works. And the question from Shruti: can one move from CBSE to IB in grade 11? Definitely, Shruti, you can do that move in grade 11. Another question from Sharad: what's the validity of AP credits? Not sure if I've understood your question. You mean the time period? It's 5 years, if that was the question. So it's valid for 5 years. And the question from Dr. Nikunjana, can student appear for ST or ST after an year? 12 score is valid for how much time to get admission years? Yeah, the schools are valid for 5 years, Nikunjana. You can take a gap year as well and then apply to college. Yes, you can do that. However, you have to justify why did you take a gap year, right? What was the importance of, was there a need to take a gap year, or could you have done the same thing even with your regular college or school, right? Do you have online coaching? We only have online coaching, Mr. Vikas. We don't do offline coaching. It's all online now. We are not doing anything offline. Yes, thanks for asking that question. Another question from Sejal. SAT scores are valid till 2 years. They're valid for 5 years, Sejal, not just for 2 years. Another question from Ara, fees, question mark. Not sure if you're talking about our fees or exam fees. For our fees, we'll be sending you the brochure, so the fees detail would be there, because there, as I said, there are multiple programs, so there's not just one program. You can see Ritvik has shared, Ritvik from my team has shared his number. Feel free to give him a call back right after this meeting, drop him a WhatsApp message on this number, and I think you'll be able to get all the details from him. I'm dropping his number again. You reach out for any ReWiser related queries, right? So I've dropped his number again. Yes, next is Vivan again. Dr. Nikunjana, thank you. Thanks, Nikunjana. Next question is from Vivan. If the pattern is changing with SAT, then what about the content books? Definitely, Vivan. That's a great question, right? So, so we've worked on it. We have about 5 sectional tests, 4 full length tests, and about 400 practice questions ready on our platform. So yes, I think these are changing times. It is difficult. There is hardly any material available, to be very, very honest, out in the market, and people are really struggling with it. We've been working day in, day out to create more and more content, and we've been able to get some success on this. Just to let you guys know, we recently got our first digital SAT score as well. So what really happened during September, November, and January? College Board gave 3 experimental digital SATs. So they did the pilot for the digital SAT, and they allowed some students to write this exam. One of our student opted for it, and she got a 1590. So honestly speaking, if you are a good student, and in the regular exam she got a 1560, right? So if you're a good student, you know, and if you understood the concept really well, you will do well in the digital SAT as well. It's not like it's changed drastically, right? It's about just you getting used to it and accustomed to it. Next question from Sejal. Except SAT and ST, what extracurricular activities does a student need to have? Big question, Sejal. I think it requires a different discussion altogether, because it all depends on student profile. It depends on, you know, I call it as a right to left approach, right? You need to figure out what is the major that the child wants to do, right? Do I want to be a software engineer, mechanical engineer, economics major, finance major, business major? What major do you want to do? And based on that, I need to move from right to left and see, to do this major, what is the right thing that I need to do in my profile, right? It could be research work, internship, social service, NGO work, leadership work, participating in different competition. You know, there are different things that one can do, but what you really need to figure out is, towards this goal of becoming something or doing a particular major, what is the right thing to do, right? So you have to really work from right to left. In that regard, feel free to reach out to us again. We'll be happy to sit with you for a free consultation session for 30 minutes and help you with that as well. On the question from Sharad, AP scores are valid for how many years? I think I've answered the question, Sharad. That's valid for 5 years. On the question from Lakshya, which subject need to select for computer science programming for undergrad admission? I'm not sure if I understood your question really well, Lakshya. Which subject need to select for computer science program for undergraduate admission? You mean which subjects you need to attend in school? That will vary from board to board, right? Honestly speaking, you can be a computer science engineer with any subject that you take in school. However, you should definitely have maths for sure. Apart from that, even if you don't have any other subjects, completely fine. You can still apply for US undergraduate computer science courses, but you have to have the maths for sure. And the question from Maitri, now that SAT is going digital, what's the equivalent of for a previous 1400 or previous 1500? Earlier you prepared for a 1500, 1450 as it was considered a good score. What do you aim for now? Same, Maitri, right? So the philosophy which College Board is saying is that whether you do a digital SAT or a pen and paper SAT, your score would be similar. Okay, one information which I forgot to miss here is, So we are kind of guinea pig here, right? Because in US, it's still a pen and paper test, and it's going to be a pen and paper for the next 1 more year, right? So they're experimenting it out on us, see how it goes in the next 1 year. When I say us, I mean everybody except US. See how it goes in 1 year, and then take a call whether they want to continue with the digital or the regular pen and paper. So what they're saying is, if you would have done a pen and paper exam and you have a 1400, even in digital SAT, you will have a 1400, right? So it's equivalent. That's what they're saying, because remember, in US, it's still a pen and paper test, and you're competing with the same set of students. And the question from Ara, my kid is in grade 11. Is he late to appear for SAT this year? So he will have to give in 10, 12 standard only. Okay. Ara, I think if yes, you're late right now to the party, I would say I think you have to really like kind of take it seriously now, because you only have about 8 months to 9 months in terms of application and everything to start, right? So the student is, I mean, late, but it's not that late. You can start preparing now and probably think about writing the exam in the month of maybe May or June or August this year, and then start applying for the college. So please feel free to reach out to Ritvik. His number is shared here. And I think we should have a one-on-one discussion to discuss this, because I think time is very, very important where you are right now at this point of time, Arav, is what I would say. Another question from Vikas: if your child is in 10th as of now, then she can write AP for that same class for getting the grades. Okay, I see 2 questions. Then she can write AP for that same class for getting the credit. You can write AP in grade 10 to get the credits. That is correct. However, I didn't get this part. For that same class for getting the credit, I'm not sure if I really got this question
Is
correct.
it for the 10th class, means the 10th class subjects? Or is it?
Understood. You can, Vikas, but it has nothing to do with the class 10 subjects, right? So what you'll have to see is what are the APs which are offered. Like, for example, there is calculus, there's statistics, there is physics, there is chemistry. A lot of these subjects she can't write in grade 10, right? Because she probably would not know most of them, right?
Okay.
So in grade 10th, you would, again, depends, right? So let's say if somebody is coming from IG and has taken ad math, then in that case, you might be able to do calculus, right? But if you're a CBSE IC student, you will never be able to do any of these. Then in that case, you might want to pick a subject like a microeconomics, macroeconomics, psychology, computer science application, right? So it's more of a one-on-one thing, discussion that is required, where we need to understand the curriculum the student is doing, the grade they are in, and the major that they want to do, right? So the AP has to be linked to that finally,
Sure.
right? So based on that, it has to be decided.
Yeah.
Thanks. Dr. Nikojina, thank you for answer. Thanks much. Another question from Mr. VP. Any idea on comparison between CBSE or ICSE board in terms of difficulty? Is any of the above two preferred over the other? When is a good time grade to shift from CBSE to ICSE? What's the reason for moving to IB? Is it because one gets credit in IB, as you mentioned, or else? Great question. And let me try and answer this question. Comparison between CBSE and ICSE in terms of difficulty, I think this is a very known fact. ICSE, ISC is a difficult curriculum as opposed to CBSE. CBSE is built for masses, so there is no doubt about it. ISC is a lot more difficult. It has a lot more breadth and depth. Is any of the above two preferred over the other? Not at all. One is a good time grade to shift from CBSE to ICSE. Ideally, I mean, if you want to, I don't know, why would you want to do it, first of all? Because it would not make much of a difference, because both are anyways our local curriculum, like our national curriculum. So it wouldn't make any difference to the colleges abroad. That's one. But even if you want to move, I would say probably 9th is a good time, because there is that subject selection process that happens between CBSE and ICSE, where you have to select different subjects. Or obviously 11th could be another good time when you can do it, if in case you want to do it. The last question that you have asked, what's the reason for moving to IB? Is it because one gets credit in IB, as you mentioned, or else? Great question. So no, I don't think credit is a good thing to think about moving to IB, right? I think there are different reasons why we think IB can benefit you if you're very sure about study abroad, right? Otherwise, even if you're in CBSE, ICSE, we have seen students going to top of the top colleges. So it's not like you can't get into top colleges. It's just that then you have to do a couple of other things to boost up your profile, right? So there are few colleges which will come by easily for IB that may not be the fact for CBSE and ICSE. And the reason is, let me give you an example, right? So If you get 92% plus overall in CBSE or ICSE board, you get, like, a rough comparison is you are at a 4-point GPA scale, right? 4.0, right? And that's the best that you can get if you're doing a CBSE and ICSE curriculum. However, if you're doing an IB curriculum, it's a weighted average curriculum, you can get even 4.5. So your potential is that you can get 4.5. The reason being, in IB, you have 3 subjects that you do as HL and 3 that you do as SL. So the HL subjects are graded on a scale of 1 to 5 and not 1 to 4. And because of that, you have a potential to earn a maximum of 4.5 GPA. But in CBSE, the maximum that you get is only 4, right? Now, let's take an example of Cornell or MIT or Stanford, right? The average GPA of a class is roughly about 4.16 or 4.2, right? That means you're already behind the curve if you're doing even the best in CBSE, right? So your chance to get into the top Ivy League, only if in case you want to get in there, right? Your chance to get into the top Ivy League reduces if you're doing a CBSE, even if you're doing really well there, because your GPA is only 4 at best, whereas their average GPA is around 4.16, right? And in IB, you can get a best of 4.5, right? So this is just one, like, a logical reasoning why IB can benefit you as opposed to CBSE or an ICSE curriculum, right? However, having said that, I've seen students from CBSE and ICSE curriculum also going to top universities, but they have to do a lot more. They will have to do APs to compensate for that credits, to show their rigor in the curriculum, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the reason why I was in favor of moving to an international curriculum. If you are very sure you want to go abroad, if that's your planning, right? And not just because of the college credit. College credit is secondary. I think first you have to look for the admission and then you have to look for the college credit saving, right? So yeah, I hope I've answered that question, Mr. VP. Okay, next I have a question from Mr. Vikas. My daughter is in grade 10th class, giving her board exam now when she should appear for giving ST. So right after her exams are done, Vikas, that's the best time to start preparing for ST. So for example, currently there are students who are writing IBCSE exam in February cycle. We are starting batches right after 6th of March. I think around 15th of March is where we are starting the batches for those students. Students who are CBSE, ICSE, they're finishing their board exam, grade 10 board exam by end of March. For them, there are batches will start in April. So right after the board exam is done for grade 10, the summer break is very, very, very critical for her. She should start preparing during that period, and she should write her first attempt maybe August of this year itself. That should be the kind of a plan for her SAT. I would say if she's writing board right now, maybe don't even focus on the AP right now, right? Maybe she can focus on AP next year, because AP happens only once a year. That's what I would suggest. Another question from Vivan. Any other scholarship exam available for Indian students? No, there are no exams as such, Vivan. Another question from Mr. VP. When does college admission process start? Which month? Where one can get the schedule? College and admission forms are given out. What's a very good score in SAT? First question, when does college admission process start? So there is no formal college admission process start date, right? Because you build your profile and everything, right? That's what we were talking about. The first 3 component you build. You build your academics from 9 to 11, 9 to 12, your standardized test score, your profile. And then when you're applying, it generally starts around June, July of your grade 12, right? That's when it starts generally. And then it goes on until December of that particular year, right? That's the timeline. There are different terminologies there again. It will take at least an hour to kind of get into that, but there are EDs, EAs, regular admissions. Happy to get on a one-on-one call, Mr. VP, and help you answer those questions. Second, college-wise, when admission forms are given out, as I said, starting June, and here it's not college-wise. So, for example, in US, there's something called Common App. Through the Common App, you apply to thousands of colleges, right? Through just one application. Then there's something called UC application. Through UC application, you apply to all the California colleges. Then there is something called Coalition App. Through the Coalition App, you apply to some other US university. Then there is something called UK application, UCAS. Through UCAS, you apply to 5 UK colleges, right? So it's not college-wise. It again has a lot more complexity. what is a very good score in SAT? Just to give you a context, 1520 is the 99th percentile. So anything above 1500 is considered to be a good score, right? Just to give you a perspective. However, the more you have, the better it is. Another question from Sejal: what exam should I opt for if I need to take admissions in European college? There is no specific exam as such, Sejal. It's largely the application process, which will have essays and so on and so forth, and some of them might have interviews as well. Another question from Sharad: how to choose which AP credit to take in class 10th, 11th, 12th, from where to take these credit? I'm assuming you mean which AP subjects to take and not credits to take, right? Because credits are linked to the subject. So yes, it's as I said, it's a personal process, Sharad. We'll have to sit with the child, see what curriculum, which grade they are in, which board are they doing, what subject they're doing in school, and based on that, recommend what APs they should be taking. So again, I would request, I think Ritvik has shared his number. Please connect with him. Ritvik can also connect with you. We have your number here and help you answer this question, because it's again a very, very one-on-one conversation. Another question, it's an unknown. What about state board? You are not mentioning about them. They do have chance to get admission. I think I have mentioned state board. I'm really sorry if I have not. So anything apart from international curriculum is same for me, right? Whether it's CBSE, ICSE, state board, all of them are similar. So anything that I've said so far for CBSE, ICSE is also eligible and applicable for state board, right? So I hope that answers the question. Mr. VP, very insightful. Thanks. I'm glad it was useful. Another question from Sejal: I'm an AS level student and want a major in aerospace engineering. What's the best country for me to take admission? Very, very specific question, Sejal, right? I think we'll have to do a one-on-one conversation and sit with you and with your parents to try and understand what you're trying to look for. It's not just about aerospace engineering. What you also really need to look at is the cost of living, the cost of education, the job prospects, the visa prospects. There are a lot of complexities that you have to really look at when you're planning to go abroad for the undergrad studies, right? So I would say happy to do a one-on-one call with you. You can set up a call with Ritvik. His number is out there. I'll request Ritvik to again post it up in the message. Feel free to call him up, drop a WhatsApp message. He might get a lot of calls right now. So maybe drop him a WhatsApp message so that he can reach out to you, give a reference of today's webinar. Next question from Angad: is online IB curriculum possible and college offering it? No, IB is not offered online. That's one thing. You can do IGCSE and A levels, which is the Cambridge curriculum. So Cambridge can also be written as private candidate, but IB has to be done through a college. You cannot do it as a private candidate. Question from Mr. VP: can one shift to IB in 11? Yes, sir, you can shift to IB in grade 11. Another question from Prisha: what are some options for students starting with 12th this year? You have to really run fast. That's my first advice. Set up a call with Ritvik as soon as possible. Because if you're starting 12th this year, that means you have to do a lot of things. If in case you are planning to apply abroad, right, then you have to finish your STs, ACTs, whichever exam that you want to write, and then start with we'll have to look at your profiling and everything, and then we also have to look at your college app, the app. You have to look at the shortlisting of universities and so on, right? So you don't have too much time. I would say, book your meeting as soon as possible. Talk to somebody, get some advice, and get going. Because if in case you are looking to go abroad, the process is very different from India. It doesn't start after you're done with the grade 12. It starts before, right? I hope that helps, Prisha. And I'll request Ritvik to also note this name and probably reach out to her. Another question from Pallavi: thank you for this insightful session. I would like to get more information on the AP course and process. Would be happy to discuss with the team. Thank you again. Thanks, Pallavi. We've noted down your name. Ritvik, please note down Pallavi's name. And you can share your contact number with her, and probably she can share hers. Sejal: okay, thanks, sir. Another question from Vivan: where can one learn AP curriculum? So we do it at ReWiser as well. We offer about 12 courses right now, Mr. Vivan. Calculus, AB, BC, statistics, microeconomics, macroeconomics, physics, chemistry, bio, computer science, world history, psychology. So these are few subjects that we do cover at this point of time. However, there are more subjects obviously that you can take. One of the options that you can look at is go to Khan Academy. Khan Academy is a free resource, whether it's for SET, whether it's for AP. Feel free to reach out there. Check online. They have some recordings. I mean, they have some video sessions. Recorded sessions available as well. You could also look at that as a start point at least, right? So that is something that you can explore. Dr. Nikunjana, thank you for this insightful session. I'm glad it was useful, Nikunjana. What about various scholarships offered by universities and how to prepare for them? You cannot prepare for the scholarships, unfortunately, in US. There's no very specific. So there are two kinds of scholarship people can apply to, something called FAFSA, but that's only for US-based students. Then there's something called CSS profile, which is again by College Board, where you do like an application process and then wait for the results to happen. And then the other scholarships are very college-based, right? So depending on once you finalize what colleges you're applying to, then you have to get into the next level and try and see if there are scholarships available for this particular university, right? For this particular college. So you don't have to prepare for it separately. Just make sure your profile is strong. You are a strong candidate for the college. If college wants you more than you want the college, you will get the scholarship. Very state funded, right? So I think that's how you have to really work on this. You have to reach out to them with a very, very strong profile, with a very, very strong academics, with a very, very strong SET scores, with a very strong profile in terms of all the activities and research and everything that you've done. Trust me, they will give you the scholarship because, so just to let you know, we have one student. So we work with Shivnadar Foundation School, which is in UP, Bulandshahr and Dholpur, Sitapur, sorry. And so one of our students got selected into Stanford this year with 100% scholarship, right? With 100% scholarship at Stanford. This is a pure merit-based scholarship, need-based scholarship, because at Shivnadar Foundation, we only support students where the family income is less than $1 lakh. And one of the students from there got into Stanford this year with 100% scholarship. So you have to make your profile very, very strong, and then let the admission people decide whether you are worthy of that college or not. And don't run behind towards the top college, right? Run behind towards the best fit college for you, right? Not the top college might not be the best fit college for you, right? So look towards the best fit college and not the top college. That would be my suggestion and my advice. I know I've been talking about the top college for so long, but I think the important part is you have to be happy once you get into that college. You wouldn't want to be in the bottom 10% in a top college. Rather, you want to be in the top 20-30%, right? Because that's where you will have enough confidence to kind of tackle what you will face going forward, right? So try and do your best in the 4 years, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, and then apply. And once you apply, wait for your outcomes. Be more realistic with the colleges that you're applying for, with obviously applying to 1 or 2 dream universities. But apart from that, be more realistic. And it's more of a trade-off, right? If in case you don't have if you think you don't have a strong profile, then in this case, you wouldn't want to apply to a top college, right? You apply to a lower college, they might also give you scholarship. Great. I think these are okay. I got another question now. When and where to apply for diagnostic test? Dr. Nikunjana, I think Ritvik, you can again drop a WhatsApp message to Ritvik. We will all anyways be sharing. I hope you all have registered on our website and through which you got this webinar link. And if you have done that, we already have your details. We'll be sending out a mailer by end of the day today, where you will have all these details about the diagnostic test as well. However, you can reach out to Ritvik directly, drop him a message, and we'll be happy to help you out with the diagnostic test. Perfect. I think these are all the questions. I think we have extended.
I had one last question, if you don't mind.
Please. Please go ahead.
Do Ivy League colleges offer scholarships to undergrad courses for Indian students?
Yes, they do, but very rare.
The website mentions we do not offer scholarships to international students.
No, they do. Very rare. That's what I said. Again, as I said, there's a lot more complexity to it. So if you see, there are some colleges which are need-based and need-blind, right? So there are some universities, like for example, MIT for that matter, right? So it's a need-blind, right? So let's say you don't have to tell them whether you need a scholarship or not. Can you afford the college or not? When you apply to the college. If they like your profile and they give you admission, And if you go back to them and tell them, I don't have money to pay for your college, they will have to give you the entire scholarship, right? So it's a lot more complex than how it is. But yes, merit scholarships are very, very rare in case of top colleges, especially for foreign students, and it keeps on changing every year. However, you definitely have need-based scholarships that is being under offer to a lot of students. The student that I was talking about, Stanford, that was as I said, it was a need-based scholarship.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vihan. Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I hope it was a useful session. Pleasure talking to all of you on a Saturday afternoon now. And we will be sending out a mailer with all these details and the webinar recording. Feel free to share it with your network if in case you feel it is useful for anybody in your network. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Take care. Have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.